In this video, we will be discussing some simple methods related to stop loss positioning when using the wealth crossover indicator from FoxEx. As you are already aware, the position of the stop loss is directly related to each individual trader's appetite or aversion to risk. A very tight stop loss will inevitably produce more inconsistency in terms of the win-loss ratio as the markets stop you out. But tighter stop losses will also produce a much higher risk-reward ratio on your winning trades. At the end of the day, trading is all about making money or pips, and so the all-important measurement of success is the percentage gain or loss over any given period of time or any given number of trades. Let's take a look at this simple table shown here, which will expand on this point. Notice that a 30% win ratio coupled with a risk reward of 5-to-1 is actually twice as profitable as a 70% win ratio with a risk reward of only 1-to-1. In this table, notice that the win-loss ratio has been lowered by 10% across the board, and here we see that a 40% win ratio at a 3-to-1 risk-reward ratio represents the optimum trading conditions based on these criteria. Of course, in reality, trading is not as clean-cut as this, but the purpose of these tables and this illustration is simply to remind you that the win-loss ratio is relatively insignificant when compared to the percentage gain or loss column. In a perfect world, the goal is to trade in such a way which targets the higher risk-reward trades and also provides consistent and positive results in terms of the win ratio. The wealth crossover indicator from FoxEx has been engineered to help traders accomplish this powerful combination of a consistent win rate and a high risk-reward ratio. By the way, the risk-reward ratio is nothing more than a byproduct of the stop-loss position. Let's take a look at several different options regarding positioning of the stop-loss. Option number 1 is to use a percentage of the previous wave. For example, if the previous wave or white line has moved 1,000 pips at the time the trade is placed, we would then place the stop loss at, say, 100 pips away from the entry, or 10% of the previous wave. A 200 pip stop loss would represent 20% of the previous wave, and of course a 300 pip stop loss would represent 30% of the previous wave, and so on. The more conservative traders will naturally select a wider stop loss, while the more aggressive traders will be inclined to place a tighter stop loss. It depends on the individual appetite or aversion for risk. Option number 2 is to place the stop loss at the high or the low of the previous bar. This is a very aggressive method of stop loss placement, and it will typically produce a much lower win-loss ratio but a much higher risk-reward ratio. Option 3 is to place the stop at the high or the low of the previous bar multiplied by 2. This is just a more conservative version of option 2, and we simply multiply the value in pips of the last candle by 2 and then place the stop loss at that exact distance away from the entry. For example, if the previous candle has a value of 100 pips, we place the stop loss at 200 pips away from the entry. Option number 4 is to halve the risk. In other words, we can use a combination of aggressive and conservative stop-loss options and place 2 trades instead of 1. For example, if you typically trade 1% of your trading account, then place 1 trade at 0.5% using a conservative version of option 1, say 30%, and then place a second trade of 0.5% using option 2 or an aggressive version of option 1, say for example 10%. Remember that when it comes to trade management, consistency is essential. Please note that all stop loss placement methods will inevitably have varying degrees of efficiency and compatibility with you, the trader, and results will vary according to the relationship between the entry positions also. The idea is to choose a method which resonates with you and with your lifestyle and your availability, and avoid jumping from one method to the other, because as we always say, this jumping around is a bad trading habit and is the hallmark of inconsistency. You may also find it very valuable and helpful to backtest the various stop loss options mentioned in this video based on historical data on your charts. This has been a short video on stop loss placement methods when using the wealth crossover indicator from FoxEx.